Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopathic Dr. Fiona Chin, co-founder of Kidney Coach and a co-founder of Cogenesis, a range of supplements designed for people diagnosed with chronic kidney disease who are interested in increasing their EGFR and indeed decreasing their creatinine. And I am super excited today to introduce to you one of my mentors. She doesn't know that she's one of my mentors, but I'm on her program. I found Dr. Sara Pugh, and I was really trying to understand and diving down the hole of light and why it's so important, why blue light's so toxic, and understanding something called the POMC gene. And in my research, I came across this YouTube video done by Sara here, and it was the first time I'd listened to it. And I've got a biochemical background as well, so I think I'm pretty savvy, Sara. But it was the first time I could listen to someone who explained it in a way that I'm like, oh, this makes complete sense to me. And from then I started just to totally lap up all the information that you've put out there, because I'm always a big believer that if someone can explain things in ways that are fairly easy to understand, that they're generally a master of understanding that because they're able to explain it in a simple way. So for those of you who haven't come across the amazing Sara Pugh before, she is...
just can I interrupt? It's
yes.
Pugh.
Oh,
It's
Pugh.
Pugh. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. My lovely Australian accent.
That's why I was laughing. That's why I was just giggling away, and I had to say something before I just spat laughter everywhere.
I'm glad you did. So, can I blame my Australianism? I don't think I can for that one, so I won't try and pass that.
No, because I'm half Kiwi, so it's fine. We kind of. It's a Welsh surname, but people all over the world struggle with it a bit.
I did look at it, and I should have asked you before I hit record, so I apologize.
I don't know. I think the listeners will probably find it really funny.
So for those of you who haven't come across the amazing Sara before, she started her career as a hardcore research scientist. She's got a degree in biochemistry and genetics from the University of Leeds in the UK. She has a PhD in molecular mechanism and biophysics. She did research on protein folding in dementia, and then dived down the hole of statins and cholesterol. That is definitely a topic for another day. She was also secretly researching anti-aging. So I have recently found out you've been probably researching peptides probably longer than even I have. And then her research ended really when she just got sick of shoulder pain and backaches and stiffness from just what long lab days would do, and then moved into working with people with pain and movement using Pilates. And then from there, she really got into neuroplasticity and eye exercises and the vestibular system. And then she trained as a in functional neurology. And then you moved into the spiritual and hypnotherapy space. So you became a hypnosis, and didn't you do stage hypnosis? Did I? Yeah. So
yeah, I did. I did some close-up magic as well. So yes.
Amazing. And then that led you on to food and biology, and so because you're a biochemist, I guess that makes a lot of sense for you, and looking at the circadian rhythm. And again, definitely a topic for another day, because this is one I'm really interested in and have been using a lot with my patients, of making sure people are eating in accordance with their circadian rhythm. And then the place that you've landed now, that you're probably most well known as the expert in, which is quantum biology, and just, I guess it's tying everything together. So welcome to the podcast. I am really excited to have you here. Before we get started, do you want to just explain to people listening what quantum biology is and how you've tied all of this in, and why it matters? Why should people listen to a quantum biologist when it comes to kidney disease and just living well?
Yeah, there's different ways to describe quantum biology. So some people might say it's the way of combining how quantum mechanics works in the body. So that would be quantum physics, things like tunneling or superposition, sort of quantum effects, action at a distance, because that happens in the body as well. Or some people might say that quantum biology would be looking at biology through a physics lens rather than just biochemistry all the time, because with biochemistry or a chemical reaction, it's very local. It can only happen to, say, a molecule that's directly next door, whereas we know full well in the body that there's all sorts of actions and effects that happen at a distance or long range, because biochemistry is way too slow. We wouldn't be able to function the way we do at these sort of pico and nanosecond timescales and run the millions of reactions that happen in the body pretty much per second if everything had to happen with one molecule here and one there. So when you look at quantum biology that way, you have to consider light, because that can, of course, work at a distance, because light also travels at the speed of light. And then you'd incorporate magnetism, because we live in a very magnetic field, not just the Earth's magnetic field. We're surrounded by different magnetic fields, and we have them in our body. And a lot of people are not really kind of comfortable with magnetism because it's quite confusing. That is another topic for another day. But even a fridge magnet has the potential to change the electric currents in our body, because water and electric currents in the body will respond to a magnetic field. So that's more the realms of non-native EMFs, which is really important when we want to talk about water and hydration and mitochondria. Then, of course, you can say quantum biology would be about water in the body. So not water in a glass, because water's infinitely more complicated than that, which we'll get into. Then another way to think about quantum biology would be to consider it from the perspective of the mitochondria, because fundamentally without them we can't be alive, and they're intimately tied to light, water and magnetism, as well as what I was talking about at the beginning of quantum effects, because they have something called an electron transport chain, and these electrons have to get down the chain. So we can also talk about quantum biology in the terms of looking at the body, describing things like electrons and why they're important and what they do, protons, and also things like hydrogen and deuterium. So there's multiple definitions of what quantum biology is. And they're all right. And the reason it's important for people to understand is that when it comes to biochemistry, it's sort of a really old way of looking at science, and it's definitely not the be all and end all. It's interesting, but then all biology in the body depends on water, because we're made of water. So everything in biology or biochemistry is happening through the medium of water. And water is not just a solvent, it's got numerous other effects. Then for people with, say, kidney disease or any kind of disease, you can go a long way with things like movement or food and supplements and things like that. But there's always other forces and things which you need to consider that relate to physics, because basically biology is controlled by physics. It comes higher up in, if we could have a hierarchy. And then, not that I'm a mathematician or anything like that, but then you can model physics using mathematics. So biology and chemistry are lower down. And if you understand physics, then you're going to have a completely different lens to look at the body through. And just at the most basic level, because we're made fundamentally of waves, or we're all just made of charge, or matter is frozen or slowed down light or cooled down plasma or whatever, that's fundamentally treating the body physically or with the rules of physics. So if we understand physics, it opens up a lot of new ideas, a lot of them which are very simple to do, because maths and physics can be extremely complicated, but like neurology, the actual what do people have to do is pretty simple.
It's so great to hear you say all of these things. And, I'm listening to you talk, and you're talking about mitochondria and light and magnetism. And I'm like, it is the fundamental basis of what goes out, in my opinion, for so many people. And it does come right back to these really sort of simple things. And we know now that mitochondria, they've got so much attention at the moment in chronic diseases and aging and the longevity field that's blowing up at the moment. But you're right, when we take it back to the quantum side of it, there are so many things that get missed, and we move into this biohacking stem cells, and they're great. I mean, I do so many of them, and peptides, but if we're not doing all of these really basic things that you're talking about with light, optimizing that and depleting deuterium and all the things that I'm going to pass over to you and understanding water, we miss so many simple things that we can do to really optimize ourselves, and we may not need to do so many of these things that are really taking off in medicine at the moment. So I'd love you to start sort of going down the rabbit hole of that. And I guess the first place to start is, most people listening are going to have kidney disease. And so people with kidney disease are going to know about mitochondria, but they're not quite sure what that means. And they know they have to be hydrated and they have to drink water. But really, beyond that, people have no idea what it actually means to be hydrated, and people have no idea what it really means to optimize mitochondrial health in the ways that you're talking about when it comes to physics of magnetism, light exposure, and making sure that electron transport chain is working in such an effective way. Maybe, and I've given you lots of things to go down there, but maybe just starting with water, because I think, and hydration, I think that's such a simple one that is just this bulk thing of drinking enough water, make sure your kidneys are flushed, make sure your pee looks like this, and then you're doing it right. Talk to me actually about, from a quantum physics point of view and quantum biology, what optimizing hydration looks like and the nuances of water and hydration that we should all know about.
Okay, so first of all, with water, even just in a glass of water, all the molecules are doing wildly different things, and water can form microstructures. And water is probably the biggest reservoir of electrons that we have, because that's the key to the water inside the body versus the water in the glass. And the key thing to understand is the water that's inside our bodies, the fourth phase or exclusion zone water that can charge separate. So that means it separates into positive and negative charge. So first of all, it can do things like make a barrier. And secondly, it's got the ability to be able to conduct electricity like a water battery, or distribute charge. And then the other vital thing to understand about water is that as soon as it interacts with light, that's going to completely change its properties. And there's a lot of different kind of light that it could interact with, both from the outside, as in the sun, or light that we make ourselves. Then the other thing about water, it's got lots of different properties. And if we just think about really basic things of water in a glass, water's a really good solvent. So when it comes to just drinking loads of water, you have to remember things are going to dissolve in the water. So it's not about just drinking lots of water, because you're going to be dissolving things and then peeing out something that you might need. And the other thing is that the water in the glass is wildly different from what the mitochondria make, and the gel water in the body. So the gel water in the body is almost like a liquid crystalline form of water. And this, again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for very rapidly propagating information around the body, sort of like an information highway. And then, as I said before, water can absorb light. And that means it can hold light and charge. So it acts like a battery inside the body. So when it comes to just drinking water, that's not really how it works. You need to have the right environment in the body for your body to have enough of this fourth phase or exclusion zone water. And the ultimate sort of fundamental basic would be that light in the near infrared is something that expands this exclusion zone, and ultraviolet light can do it in a slightly different way. So in order to maintain this fourth phase of water, going outside in the sunlight and getting your the infrared light is a crucial fundamental way to hold this water in. And it doesn't have to be sunny for this to happen, because there's infrared light all the time, even when it's cloudy. You don't necessarily have to be in direct sunlight, because the near infrared is going to reflect off all of the plants and the ground. So it's absolutely fundamentally crucial to go outside. And the second way in which people can preserve this water battery, as we'll call it, would be to do grounding where they're directly connected to planet Earth. So there's numerous different ways of why grounding is really important. So it might be, in a simple language, we can say it's gathering electrons, so that would be more charge. The other way, we could say it's discharging positive charge. And even though it sounds slightly wooish, pretty much all of biochemistry and doctors and textbooks will tell you that we want to be at a negative charge overall. So we would call that a good redox potential. And then the buildup of positive charge is something that's unfavorable and inflammatory for the body. So if we ground ourselves or earth ourselves or connect to space or counter space, it's all the same thing. So this is a really important part of sort of basic health that absolutely everybody, regardless of age or any kind of situation in the body, can benefit from. And then on the converse, if we're on the inside all the time in an environment where there's lots of artificial blue light, this is going to inhibit the ability of the mitochondria to produce as much of this. Well, they make water, they make deuterium depleted water, and then it gets structured after they've made it inside the body. So by structured, I mean it forms these microgeometries or shapes that can hold charge and information. So the mitochondria, if we're exposed to lots of artificial blue light, there's something called complex 4 in the mitochondria that makes the water. So that's going to get inhibited. So therefore, we're making less of our own deuterium depleted water or our own metabolic water naturally. So anything that's homemade in the body is always going to be better than water that we drink is something is sort of different to the water in the body. Same as when it comes to hormones or any kind of biological product, even vitamin D, hormones, all of these different compounds you can buy. It's always 1,000 times better to let the body produce what it wants because it's different to what you'd sort of get, say, as a supplement. So that's the very basic part that everybody can do, would be to consciously go outside and then be mindful of their indoor environments, because also non-native EMF, so Wi-Fi, phones, radio waves, electricity in the walls, things like that. There's lots of things which they do that's really unfavorable to the body. So first of all, they just create stress. Just in a simple language, it's an extra stressor, and it's white noise in the body because there's lots of signals that happen in the body, very, very tiny signals, because we're talking about things at a quantum scale, and we want these to be coherent. So that would be at the right time. And also, if we've got lots of noise, say from non-native EMFs, it's going to mean the signal can't get through properly. And most people can relate to when they listen to a podcast and there's loads of noise in the background because it's windy or somebody chose the wrong microphone. It's really hard to hear the speakers. So that's what happens if we expose ourselves to non-native EMFs. I mean, we have to live in it, but there's lots of ways to be extra mindful of these devices, especially people with, say, kidney disease, not to have their phones in their back pockets all the time, switched on. And then also when it comes back to this fourth phase, or this exclusion zone water, the special water in the body that can charge, separate, and act like the water battery, act like the information highway. When we're exposed to non-native EMFs, it's going to deplete this water, I think probably up to 15 to 20%.
Wow.
So you can't do anything about that. You can't just drink more water to build back this special fourth phase or exclusion zone water. You have to change your environment. So that would be going outside. Grounding is going to build your exclusion zone and your water battery, and being surrounded by artificial light and having devices on unnecessarily, sleeping with the Wi-Fi on, being on your phone all day, that's going to be very dehydrating. And people can relate to this because whenever we have to travel or go on a flight, even though you sit down and just watch a movie or whatever, people just feel utterly exhausted and dehydrated. So it's something that even if people are not really sure of the science of this because they've never heard of it before, that you can relate it back to everyday places in life where you think, well, I drank enough water and I didn't do anything, and I just feel so tired and dreadful. So that's sort of putting it in a real life example.
Do you think that's why there's been a acceleration of these chronic diseases, because we spend so much more time inside, people aren't spending enough time in nature, we are bombed by these non-native EMFs. And so, from when and I don't understand it anywhere near to the same level as you, but when I've looked at water in this crystalline structure and just how important it is, especially just for fascia, which you know so much about with the Pilates, and just how it helps move nutrients around the body. And then, like you said, it's the communication highway of the body to actually transmit biophotons between each other. That, because I guess you're talking about, we are set up to be chronically dehydrated, regardless of how much water you're drinking, for the type of this fourth phase water battery that we need to be healthy. It sounds like we're living in a world that sets us up for almost this chronic dehydrated state and suboptimal health. Would you think that's a fair comment?
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Because we're just animals, and we're supposed to live out. We're supposed to spend time outside, and yes, sure, indoor living is going to be a problem. So there's lots of reasons. Because first of all, the mitochondria massively, and everything in life depends on the sun to set the timing in the body. So if we're not going outside, say seeing the sunrise, getting the ultraviolet light in the morning, then getting enough vitamin D, sort of being around for the sunset. If everything's out of time in the body, this also creates a huge amount of confusion and chaos and disorder and entropy, and obviously entropy is aging and neg entropy is the opposite, sort of anti-aging or healing. So without correct timing in the body, because we need the sun to set the time for us, sort of via the SCN, which is our main clock in the body. So if the mitochondria don't really know what time it is, they don't really know whether they're supposed to be making lots of water, or whether they're supposed to be making biophotons or talking to the immune system, or whether we need to burn fat or save it. So this idea of starting with absolute basics, and just if we get the timing in the body right, a lot of other things are going to tie in place. Because also you mentioned things like peptides and supplements, which at the end of the day, when you think about, say, I don't know, hexarelin or ipamorelin or something, a growth hormone and is also very much tied to circadian aspects in the body. So if all of the clocks and everything are out of line in the body, and somebody doesn't know what time it is, or maybe even biologically how old they are, adding in a growth hormone, which has its own two-edged sword, as we know, because after a certain age we don't make very much. I think if people want to use these kind of things, including HRT, that if your fundamental body clock's all out of time, and then you start to put biomolecules in, because we make growth hormone at very given times of the day, sort of a pulse before bed, and obviously it opposes insulin, so it's going to be around when we're not eating. And then all of our sex hormones and vitamin D, they all get synthesized and made at a very precise time. If we're just putting things in the body randomly, and we have a terrible body clock because we just live inside all the time, it's just a recipe for a lot of problems. Because again, people might think, oh, well, so what about my clocks being out of time? Well, it's a bit like trying to run an airport and there aren't any clocks in there. It just would be dangerous and a disaster. And then when it comes to cells and how they want to behave and divide, and when they need to be killed and when they're allowed to live, that's all dependent on our cell cycles and our cell clocks. So I think it's really important to make sure your own circadian rhythm, your internal one, is top notch. Because the sun and people would just say the day-night cycles drive biology, and we can all do something to be more in line with that. And then other things that people want to do later are going to be safer, or they'll probably work better. So it's really important to understand the link between the timing and the time, because again, you mentioned aging and anti-aging, and that's fundamentally, we were talking about time here. So if our timing in the body's all over the place, in our body clocks, and we're having time expansion, that's obviously a recipe for shortening our lifespan, and it's just a different way of describing aging through a physics lens. So that's sort of what I'd have to say there.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So, what I hear you say is hydration is not just drinking water. The simple things that people can do are making sure that they watch sunrise, sunset, and get UV light exposure during the day. And then on top of that, making sure we're doing things like grounding and getting outside. And you're absolutely right. Obviously, people would know that green reflects red. So if you're sitting in amongst the plants, my whole backyard is just full of green jungle, so it reflects a lot of infrared, getting that. And then Are there then things that people could do on top of that, making sure they're drinking at certain times, like drinking outside when you're in the sun or eating at certain times that would even make that body clock and help the mitochondria and all your hormones line up to an even greater degree to enhance healing? Are there little tweaks that people can do with that that would enhance that and enhance the hydration effects?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because when it comes to drinking water, there's a whole world here. Because, first of all, you want to distill it because you don't know what's dissolved in tap water. And like I said, the properties of water completely change depending on what's dissolved in it and what kind of light it's been exposed to. So distilling the water and then remineralizing, just because with remineralizing, we get 80% of our minerals from food anyway, but we need to remineralize water to give it charge or piezoelectricity so that when you structure it or put, when the water forms these microgeometries, which in themselves can contain sort of energy and information, we need a charge, which would be the minerals. Then you can do all sorts of other things with the water, like crystals are really interesting because they can, and tensor rings can do things like imparting ultraviolet light into water. So now we've got more energy again in the water. Then there's things like water vortexes, because the vortex will do things. A vortex is going to make gravity, or we could just call it a voltage. So that's another way to add energy or charge to the water. And people have known about this for sort of hundreds of, well, since Victor Scharberger's time, so well over 150 years. And water vortexes are used a lot in agriculture and fish farms. And you don't have to just drink the vortex water. If the seeds or plants growing beside a water vortexer grow better. So then we've got that aspect of improving the water that we drink. The next thing you can do would be to make hydrogen rich water, because hydrogen is like the universal energy molecule on the planet. And there's probably 2,000 papers now about hydrogen rich water. And I think that will be something for people who've got kidney disease, that it's really important to do all of those things, because you're not adding any chemicals to your water. All you're doing is using physics to make the water that you're drinking more energetic and more coherent. And again, it comes back to, if we put good information into the body with water that's not just dirty tap water that's been crashing around pipes, if we distill it, wipe it clean. I sometimes use an ultraviolet C light as well, because on a physics level you can remove, that could be other resonances and even contaminants, and then I can structure the water and energize it how I want, and then I can drink it, and it's going to be way better than just the half dead water that comes out of the tap. So if this sounds wooish, it's not really, because if we think about water out in a stream outside, it's going to be crashing around, it's moving. There's natural vortices and things in the water where fish like to hang out, because there's always a lot more things for them to eat there, and it's just better quality, animals just know. Then that water's going to be outside in the sun. And it's also going to be in like a riverbed that's going to be full of mud, which has got minerals in it, all sorts of minerals. You can even get gold and silver. So I like adding monoatomics to my water as well. So all I'm doing with making my water, I'm not making like a concoction. I'm just putting it back to how water would be if I could just go out and drink it from a stream. In my house. And of course, there are other things which people can do with water. I'm not a fan of anything that's an electronic water structure, really. I'd rather use the things that I've listed, just because it's sort of a natural way. So for somebody, say, with a kidney problem, the very first thing they could do is make their water that they drink as good as possible, because none of this is particularly expensive to do, and it's something that, even if it sounds stupid, it actually isn't, because like you said at the beginning, people with kidney situations are told they need to flush things out. And then the other aspect about kidneys, I do know certain, I think Thomas Weems I know quite well
Yes.
about ketogenic diets, because that's another way to make more water, because fat has more electrons than glucose, and then that means you're going to get twice as much water out of the mitochondria just by a simple equation. And to do a real ketogenic diet, it does have to be sort of like 60 or 50 grams of protein. So I know that there are limitations on how much protein people with kidney disease can have. And there's actually nothing wrong with doing those kind of ketogenic diets, because they are different to just excluding carbohydrates. Because if you have a lot of protein, it starts to behave like glucose in the body. So now you're effectively mixing glucose and fat together, and that's going to be doing something where it can trigger the Randle cycle, which can be sort of potentially inflammatory. And it's just a beginner's mistake that a lot of people make with those kind of ways of eating. But a real ketogenic diet designed for medical reasons, done like that, is going to create more water at the mitochondria. On the converse side, because I've done a ketogenic diet for absolutely ages for different reasons, then I don't think anymore that you should do it all the time, because there are certain times when you do actually need to run some electrons through complex 1 in the mitochondria, because the way that the electrons from fat and glucose behave differently in the mitochondria. So glucose is inherently more inflammatory and is going to produce more free radicals, but that's only if you just live on that and do it all the time. And that's going to manifest eventually as things like type 2 diabetes. But on the other hand, there's benefits to running some electrons through complex 1 in the mitochondria sometimes for autophagic effects, but also from a hormonal perspective. Eating what I do, again, back to the water, I just eat fruit for 4 days and make sure the fruit is fruit that you've grown or picked in your local environment. So first of all, you're getting a whole load of structured water that the plant made, so it's special water. Then if you pick it fresh, you're going to have more charge, because the electrons or the charge or the chi or whatever you want to call it does leave food probably, I think, after 6 hours. And then the back to what you were saying about food and body clocks and light, when the light or the food that we put in our mouth. So food is fundamentally, as David Bohm would say, frozen light, which is matter. We want to put the same information in our mouths with the light, and as you said before, the light's going to contain the information from the biophotons and the electrons which have interacted with that light. So we want to eat the same light information through the plants as the light environment that we live in, because it all comes back to everything in the body. We just want coherence. So it's like an orchestra, that you don't want to suddenly put an electric guitar into an orchestra. There's nothing wrong with electric guitars, it's just they don't belong in an orchestra. So when you put food in the body, say in the UK, suddenly eating a pineapple in January is like putting a electric guitar into an orchestra, because the information in the light and the water in that pineapple is completely incompatible with the UK. So it's going to create chaos or confusion or entropy, and all of that leads to inflammation. So just in simple terms, we just want all the time, as much as we can, to have coherence in the body. And you also asked before about EMFs and all of the man-made electromagnetism. That's again white noise or chaos, or like somebody running a giant fan when the orchestra's trying to play. So again, it's going to create discoherence, and it just means all the little quantum signals in the body just are going to be less efficient. So that's also the reason about the seasonal and local produce. And even if people don't understand any of that or think it's stupid, I just think it's really good to support local businesses. And also, when you've got disease or illness, when it comes to food, it's much better that you can go and see, oh, there's all my melons growing in the field, and I can see that they're not being sprayed on, and there's the apples that I'm going to buy later. So it does make sense to buy seasonal and local, because at least you can find out more about what you're going to put in your mouth. Whereas if you buy things from another country, you don't know what the rules are for chemicals. And then anybody with, even people that don't have kidney disease, you have to be really mindful of things like glyphosate and Agent Orange. And there's numerous different chemicals that, I think when I last looked, there's something like, I don't know, 70,000 chemicals in circulation, and we don't really know the long-term effect of 40,000 of them. So when it comes to things like food and produce, you want to, as much as possible, get the food that's got the best information in it. So it's not just about macros and calories. There's also the quantum information at a different level, because our mitochondria and everything read things like a barcode at a quantum level. So if you put weird, confusing food in, it's going to create chaos. and then you're going to get more inflammation and age more. And on the other side of the coin, obviously processed food that's completely artificial in some ways, when you put that in your body, it's completely alien. So even though it's got calories and protein and fat in it, the actual information of that food at a quantum level is completely bizarre. And biology absolutely hates surprises. It always wants to predict what's going to happen next. So if you live somewhere and apples are growing, say I've got apples in my garden, my body knows that at some point it's going to get an apple because it knows it's there, so it's expecting it. Whereas if I suddenly say put like a Twinkie or some insane kind of unicorn kind of, what do they call, cupcakes, it's not expecting that. So there's
Yeah.
lots of little things that people can do. And I think nowadays, because you were asking about EMFs and things, that yeah, we have to accept that we can't do anything about 5G and other things. We can class it, okay, it's a stressor. So what other stressors can I easily get rid of so that overall my stress bucket or my threat bucket is a bit lowered? So I think that's also an important part of, for people who are biohackers that listen, is that it's not always about sort of adding things in. It's sometimes taking stuff away or finding a way to improve what you do already. Because like I said, eating food from countries that are thousands of miles away is confusing and stressful for your body. So then there's numerous different things that people can do about reducing stresses. And then again, the more stressed we get, it's like an unfavorable situation in the body. I can't say for certain what happens to the water in the body, but definitely on kidneys, we've got adrenal glands. So if we're stressed, we're just tiring those out. And then there are sort of lots of different effects. I don't know all of them off the top of my head of different hormones that regulate peeing and water flow. And definitely when it comes to stress, it's going to do something unfavorable and it's extra burden
Yeah.
for somebody.
Yeah, no, you're right. I was just going to say aldosterone and all those hormones are
Mm.
absolutely going to throw the kidneys out and change blood pressure and things like that. And want to circle back to two things that you said that I know people ask me questions about. Hydrogen water, it's something that people ask about all the time. And you mentioned you're not a huge fan of using electronics. So would you use a hydrogen generator for water, or are you happy with the tablets that you can throw in? What is your
Oh,
tips for
oh,
good
oh yeah.
quality
Oh no, that's a good
hydrogen water?
point. Because actually, with the hydrogen water, um, yes, you have to plug it in and use a proper machine like an Axiom, because when it comes to making hydrogen, it's chemistry on a crazy level. So if you're using like a hydrogen water bottle or something that's cheap, that's never been tested, you don't know whether you're alkalizing the water, because that's not good at all, or whether you're making chlorine or radicals, or whether there's heavy metals in the membrane, all sorts of things. So first of all, you want an actual genuine machine that is used in some of the scientific research. And then you have to use a plug-in hydrogen machine, because you need to have the hydrogen water over about 1.6 parts per million minimum for it to be effective. And you also need the hydrogen not only to be made properly without unwanted other molecules like chlorine and all sorts of other things. You also want the hydrogen to be stable so that it doesn't just all disappear out of the water as soon as you've made it. It's going to last for a bit. So when it comes to the tablets, I just think they're all right in an emergency. And it's also, if somebody's really curious about hydrogen, but doesn't want to buy a machine yet, they could try it and see what happens. But I would just say making hydrogen biochemical reaction in the gut from a tablet, which you don't really know exactly what's in it, is sort of okay-ish. But on the other hand, it's much better to have your own hydrogen water that you can distill and clean and do whatever you want and add hydrogen yourself. And also when it comes to people with illness, I think hydrogen's really safe, because you're not doing anything. It's not a drug or anything unusual, and there's a lot of research behind it. So that's what I'd say for hydrogen water. And I'm a big fan of inhaling hydrogen and using it through earphones, because in the body everything's connected. So just because there's one bit bad, it doesn't, you can aid a different part of the body, which can then have an overall huge effect on all the rest of the system. And there's an amount that the brain does control with inflammation and things like that. So definitely with hydrogen, I'm a big fan because I think it's very versatile, and you can say inhaling would be one way, but also people with more of like a local issue, like a gut issue or say kidneys, drinking the hydrogen water is definitely something to explore.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I'm a big fan of it as well, and I've been seeing you post about the Axiom, but yeah, we've got the tablets and all these other crazy things going around. So I definitely wanted your opinion on that. And the other thing I wanted to circle back to, because people ask about this, is how you mentioned that mitochondria create deuterium depleted water when they function properly. So can you walk me through a little bit more of that, and maybe dig into what deuterium is more? I know, I understand it acts as a growth factor and actually can help with cell division, and maybe that might be great for repairing tissue and things like that. Could you talk a little bit about deuterium? Because I don't think people understand quite that term. Most people have never going to have heard before. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, you've kind of got a bit mixed up with the growth factor. So it's like a negative aspect of it. So first of all, with deuterium, it's an isotope of hydrogen. So it's like hydrogen, but it's got a neutron in its nucleus as well, if we want to pretend that that's how atoms are made. So it's going to be twice as big, and then it's going to have a different magnetic moment, and it's got its ability to, you can make, it does lots of things, but it's going to have a different effect, we'll just say, for now. The next thing with deuterium is in the body, when it comes to biochemistry, like pretty much all of our molecules and stuff is made of carbon hydrogen bonds, and the carbon deuterium bond is going to be significantly stronger than a carbon hydrogen bond. So that means when the body wants to pull hydrogens off and do chemical reactions, it's much harder work to get the deuterium off. So it's just, in a simple language, going to make everything slower in the body. So like, I can't emphasize enough with what I've been trying to convey in the podcast. It's about time, and it's also about how quickly can we do all of our reactions in the body to be efficient. So if it's going to be slower to move deuterium around, that's just overall, it takes longer. And in terms of physics and time, if something takes longer, then you're losing energy. So that's one part. Then when it comes to making vitamin D, because say if there's a deuterium there instead of a hydrogen, even the UVB light's going to struggle a bit to crack the cholesterol open. So that means people who've got like a deuterium load, then even if they go out in the sun, it's just going to be harder for them to make vitamin D, because the reaction to make the first phase of making vitamin D from sunlight is only an 8% efficient reaction anyway. So if you're full of deuterium, it might go down to 5 or 4%. And vitamin D is like central to health, including kidney health, because it does 200 things in the body. And I don't know the intricate details of vitamin D in the kidney. I just know one of the steps of making vitamin D happens in the kidney. So that's one reason. Then the next reason with deuterium, in the mitochondria, to make ATP, there's like a little motor called the ATPase, and protons are supposed to go down. So that'll be a H plus. And then a deuterium or a deuteron is twice the size, and it's got different charge and properties. So when it tries to go down the ATPase, it's going to block it and cause stalling. So now we've basically stuffed up the mitochondria. And as you said right at the beginning, like pretty much 85% of disease is rooted in mitochondrial dysfunction. So say if somebody has kidney disease, I don't know what kind of kidney disease people have. There are diseases that can get better because maybe they've got, for whatever reason, there's a lot of deuterium or bad body clocks or whatever it is isolated to their kidney, and that's why the disease is manifesting there. It's just like the weakest link. So it's always beneficial to think about deuterium because it's something we can all do something about. So we can just say that the deuterium is going to damage mitochondria, and then that's going to create inflammation. And then whichever organ the mitochondria are in, if they're not working properly, the organ's going to not work properly either. And it can even kill the mitochondria. So that's another reason deuterium's bad. Then if we come back to the water battery in the body, deuterium, when it makes water, because we can have DHO, which would be heavy water, or well, actually D2O is heavy water. If we had too much deuterium in places like in the water, it's going to affect how the charge is distributed, because the dielectric constant of deuterium is different to the dielectric constant of, say, water made with hydrogen. So it just means it's not going to be able to distribute charge as quickly or as efficiently. So it's just like having, when our phones get a bit old, the battery just sort of goes flat quicker and it doesn't hold the charge as well. So that's what could happen if there was too much deuterium in the water, like the important water in the body. There's theories that deuterium in the cerebral spinal fluid and in the blood, under certain circumstances, if they were under pressure, could produce light, and that's helpful. But that's because it's in the blood, in a fluid, and it can't get in the mitochondria, and it's not in the cholesterol getting in the way of hormone production. It's not in the melatonin or anything like that getting in the way. So it has specific places it's supposed to be. So and also we need deuterium in our collagen and our connective tissues, because like I said, it's right at the beginning, it makes a stronger bond, so it has more tensile strength. So as long as it's in the places it's supposed to be, not in excess, then it's going to be fine. That's why things like collagen supplements are not good at all, because you're basically concentrating, you're using tissue that's full of deuterium anyway in the body, then you're processing it in a factory to make it even more concentrated. And then you've taken away lots of the other connective tissue that would have naturally come with the collagen. So it's not full spectrum connective tissue anymore, like eating ox cheek or oxtail. And then the deuterium content in collagen supplements can be over 300. And then even seed oils, which can be hydrogenated processed oils that we all know are bad, that they're very high in deuterium. So they're over 200. Then glucose is about 150, same as the ocean's about 155, and then fat is about 120 to 130. So in terms of bad health, when people have done studies, you don't want your deuterium really to be over about 140 when you say do a saliva test or a breath test. So like I said, there's lots of things people can do to make sure that they don't let it go too high. And that's why predominantly a keto diet is going to be lower in deuterium, but then we can deplete deuterium in strong sunlight and through sweating. And that happens to be the time when the fruit's out. So it's, again, I'm not saying that people have to be strict keto in the middle of summer, because it's not really compatible with the season, unless you say live like in Greenland or somewhere like that. And then with the growth factor, Dr. Gabor Shomoli has studied deuterium for about 30 years. And the way in which the proton or the pH level and the D to H, or deuterium to hydrogen ratio, that dictates whether the cell grows or doesn't grow. So it's like the apoptotic switch. So when the deuterium to hydrogen level's too high, cells are growing and dividing and not dying when they're supposed to be. So that's how there's a humongous link to deuterium and cancer. So in terms of having more deuterium, you're not going to improve I don't think you could really, it is a growth factor, but then it's a time and a place growth factor, like say growth hormone, that seeds and flies and things with a short lifespan, they love deuterium, and then children and babies need deuterium because they're growing. But as soon as we're an adult, we definitely want to focus on keeping it the right level, because it's all about unwanted growth. So it's like everything, growth and mTOR and everything, they're not bad or anything. You just want to control them so they're not on all the time. So that's sort of the way to think about deuterium and health.
So fascinating. You mentioned a few things there that contribute to deuterium load, and what I'm hearing is that is the Western lifestyle of being inside, EMFs, fried fatty foods and seed oils and all of those sort of things. Are there any other things that people, like, do medications increase deuterium load? Are there other things that people may not be aware of that will be increasing the deuterium load, so they really need to think about, I need to make sure that I'm out in the light and doing all these things that we know deplete deuterium?
Yeah, because as I was saying, when it comes to chemical reactions and hydrogen and everything's organic chemistry, as in carbon hydrogen chemistry, when people make supplements and things in labs and factories, they don't fractionate the hydrogen and deuterium because it's too expensive. So unnecessary overconsumption of supplements, especially the more that you take, the more deuterium there's gonna be in them because they've been synthetically produced in an environment where you don't know how much deuterium has been incorporated, and that's so say something like a Prozac. I think there's something like 18 hydrogens in Prozac molecule, and some of them could be a deuterium, but because people only take something like 50 or 100 milligrams, it's not really of a major concern unless people are taking like 5 other psychiatric medications, because they're all going to have carbon hydrogen bonds. So it's all about, it adds up. I'm not saying supplements are bad, but then I meet people that just take like loads and loads of things, and I'm like, do you even know how that works, and why are you mixing that with that? They're just thinking the more supplements they take, the better they'll get, but they're just now doing the opposite. So that's one way, is just to make sure if you're going to use supplements that you know what they do, and to choose things that are actually going to work, not just because you saw a Facebook ad on something. So that's one thing. And also like saunas, like I said, and sweating are going to deplete deuterium. So you can do
Yes.
that whether it's summer or winter, in saunas or in by exercise. So there's lots of ways to deplete it. And then, as I said before, if you're inside all the time and your mitochondria say impaired a bit, you're not making your own deuterium depleted water to flush yourself out from the inside. Because sure, you can buy deuterium depleted water and drink that. That's definitely
I'm going to ask
something
you
that
about that.
that
Yeah.
I do. You're not meant to drink it all the time, really. I mean, some people add a little bit to bring their water down, their tap water from 150 parts per million down to 142. And then other people periodically will do a deuterium depletion and use the water for a given number of months, because that's sort of the water that comes from the deuterium depleted water. The deuterium, that water can go anywhere in your body, so you don't know where exactly it's going to flush out. Whereas the water that your mitochondria make, you know that the deuterium depleted water is coming from the inside of the cell. So right back to, you're asking me to define what is hydration. It's about, the mitochondria can make water itself. So that's actually true hydration, because it's hydrating the cell from the inside. I'm not saying that other water that we drink's not important. It is. Like a lot of things all matter, but so does the light, and so does the magnetism when it comes to water, and to some extent, and also so does the food. So there's lots of things that people can do to optimize their mitochondria and their water.
I love that, and I love how we sort of did a big circle,
Yeah.
and I could keep going with you forever, Sarah, but I won't, because I know it's your morning and you want to get going. But I think that was a fabulous way to bring it back, and it's interesting, like these are things that aren't expensive, they're easy to do, and I always say to all my patients and all my biohackers, I'm like, you can't out biohack nature, you just can't. Nature is so intelligent when it comes to that, and we as humans like to think we're smarter than all of that sort of stuff, but we're just not. So, and everything that you talk
I
about
would
is,
actually say water's cleverer than we are. So I
love
always
that.
say that when people use supplements and things, you don't know how you're altering the something like the refractive index of water, because that's sort of the, in simple language, like it can slow down or bend light in the body. So in some ways, water's cleverer than we are. So but that's the whole thing about it, is that I'm not against biohacking or anything at all. I think it's fascinating. I just think sometimes people's brains are too much on the shiny new objects. And like I said, you're basically putting things from the outside in you. So you need to make sure that you as most coherent and ready as possible to receive whatever it is that you want to play with, because it could backfire. So, but that's probably why, with all of the data and anecdotes about people and supplements, there's a wildly different response, because you're actually putting it into a different human. And like I said, the water in 2 glasses of water beside each each other are going to be completely different, even though both are technically water. What's actually going on at the molecular and quantum level in those two glasses of water is completely different. So with humans, we really are like really different. So, and also we can be different from day to day as well. So I think it's all, great what you do. And, I hope I've helped in some way to shed some light onto
Literally.
quantum biology. Yeah.
No, you literally have, and like I say, you're a gift to the quantum biology world in just the way that you are able to share your knowledge. So for anyone that doesn't know, you can find Sarah on busysuperhuman.com. She's got some amazing programs. She's got some stacks that if you follow Substack and things like that, that you can subscribe to and listen to. That's, where I've been taking a lot of information. I'm actually eagerly awaiting your new program that's about to come out. I know you're busy writing that and updating that. So if you're happy for me, I'll share all those links for people to have a look at. And you've got a private Facebook group of people decide to join your program. You're very generous with your time on there and answering questions and running your lives. So I think if anyone's interested in this, Sarah is the person to go to. If you want to be able to absorb and understand the information in a way that also doesn't have all the politics, I won't say anything more that goes with all of that. So it's nice, easy, great platform to go to. Easy to, I think as far as a really can be a mind-bending topic, it's easy to understand. And what I love about this, it's everything you said. It's doesn't have to be hard. You go outside, make sure you watch sunrise, sunset, and do some simple things with your water. And if you just started with that and eating seasonally, you are going to be setting yourself up for success. It's great. I love that.
Exactly. It's all about just thinking about stressors and thinking which one can I, because even if you got rid of 5% of the non-native EMFs in your house by just unplugging devices you're not using, like the washing machine, or we all do it. We all have things plugged in that we're not using. Even that's going to make a difference, even if you don't think it does. So there's lots of really easy things to do as well for people, because there's always people that want to do everything now. And then there are other people that make one change every 2 months. The tortoises and the hare, the tortoise and the hare. So, there's lots of ways to sort of incorporate this. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. And yes, it's funny what you said about the politics, because I think the other thing about quantum biology that's really important is to understand that every country's is different, that there's different considerations with, that's why I brought up deuterium, because that's one of Australia's slight Achilles heels. Yes, I know you've got like the hole in the ozone layer, but then in some ways the EMFs technically could go out the hole. So and there's also with politics and everything and quantum biology, there's a whole load of nuances to knowing what to do where you live, or somebody that's been there and lived there for a bit. So I think it's sort of really important to learn quantum biology from lots of different people, because they're all going to give you a different take, especially if they happen to live in Australia as well. They're going to know something that I don't, because I just happen to have not been there for a long time. But I do know what's there, and like the sort of how to navigate the Australian sort of terrain. But then it's like massive country, so the north of Australia is a completely different country really to the south.
Completely different. And most of our listeners are in the US, so then we've got all of that. So but thank you so much. I'll put all your details and links below. Anyone listening, I highly recommend, if you are into this, to join. And even if you just decide to read the Substacks and things like that, that information coming through is amazing. Remember to hit subscribe and like. That way you will get notified anytime we put out more content. And if you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com, and we're on social media under all the same things. Sarah, thank you again. I really appreciate you as a human and everything that you're doing to broaden everybody's understanding on this. I think it's a field and light. I think I'm tipping it'll outdo peptides and biohacking in the next 3 or 4 years to come.
I don't know. I think there's ways to combine peptides and biohacking and light. So I just think it's about, never stop looking for answers, and, combining fields. Like even scientists that work in the same building, the physicists don't know what the biologists on the next floor are even doing. So I think there's a place for all of things, but also to always remember the physics and the light and the sun. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank
No,
you.
I've enjoyed having you on. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for listening. We hope to see you next time. Bye.